Mookie Betts isn't back up to his fighting weight yet. Don't tell that to the Tigers because he knocked them out with a 1-2 punch. Let's talk about it live on Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks to our everydayers for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. And thanks for being here live with us on Sunday night. If you are, remember this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. So please subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now to make it really easy for yourself to find. If this is your first time with us, my name is Jeff Snider. That guy next to me is Vince Samperio. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, just like most of you. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room, so we bring you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And speaking of bets, Vince, Friday night's game was the Mookie Betts show. It's always fun when a game – you don't know who the star of the game is until super late. Mookie Betts, he had a single earlier in the game, but it wasn't until the 8th inning that he really started to take over, hit a go-ahead home run in the 8th inning, and then a walk-off home run in the 10th inning. For a guy who is still, 15 pounds off of his playing weight, it seems like there's more power there than I expected there to be.
Yeah, I mean, Mookie's not one known for majestic home runs that are always no doubters off the bat. The ones he hit these kind of plays into that because they were wall scrapers. And when Mookie's going right, has all the weight, they're probably, at least a couple rows up the pavilion maybe. But either way, he had enough power. That's really all that matters. And it came through. Obviously, it was not the latest game that happened, but it was the funnest game that happened. Saturdays was a win, but a comeback and then lose the lead and then lose and then go down by 2 and then come back and then end up winning on a walk-off home run, going into a drone show at Dodger Stadium. That's always fun.
Yeah, in the last, 50 Dodger games or so, we've now had 3 really fun walk-off homers where they didn't really need a home run. You had Shohei Ohtani's 40-40 grand slam when a single would have done the trick. You had Freddie's walk-off grand slam of the World Series where a single would have done the trick. And then this one, like even a sac fly would have done the trick. At least Ohtani and Freeman, both of theirs were 2 outs, so they needed to get a hit. Mookie, literally, he's just trying to get the ball in the air. And you could tell that the pitch reminded me of whichever one of his sac flies. I get the 2 sac flies mixed up in Game 5 or in Game 1 and Game 5 of the World Series that Mookie hit. But one of them was on a low pitch. I think it was the one in Game 1 that he went down and got it and poked it out to center field.
Almost hit over Judge's head.
Yeah. But the same thing, a couple inches below the zone, and he just went down and got it knowing I just need to get the ball in the air. And in the World Series twice, he got the ball in the air and got the sac fly when he needed it. This time he got the ball in the air and, it happened to go over the wall a la Steve Finley too, if you want to go back that far. But it was such you could see the emotion on Mookie's face as he rounded the bases. It didn't feel like second game of the season or fourth game of the season, whatever it was. It felt like a huge weight off his shoulders because he's been through so much the last few weeks, which is also, kind of the theme with Freddie Freeman's too. As fun as Freddie Freeman's grand slam was, a lot of the story was all that Freddie had been through, physically and emotionally and everything. Mookie, there's some of that too. And just, I think he was probably as excited as we were to say, hey, I can still hit home runs. He said after the game, it's fun to hit 160-pound homers. Yeah.
And for him, we see Mookie, we saw he lost weight. You can tell in the, he's swimming in his jersey a little bit in those first few games. But I don't think we really realize what the extent of it is. And, not being able to eat for 2 weeks is got to be frustrating in itself. Not being able to hold down food for 2 weeks, not being able to work out and do your job. And, maybe not everyone for doing their job part, but for Mookie, he loves his job and, he loves being out there and it always kills him to not be out there. And I mean, I don't remember if it was in the post game scrum or in a different interview. I don't know. There's been a lot of Mookie, like little interviews here and there, but he kind of talked about him crying to his wife and kind of really being emotional about this situation. I don't know if it was, if he was worried about it extending beyond, or if it was something more serious, or if it was just a matter of frustration, like, whatever it was, there was a lot of emotion in Mookie behind this, and you could see it. I mean, we get to see Mookie emotion, but it's normally not as high, especially like I said, a first fourth game of the season against the Tigers. Like, we've seen the emotion against the Padres when he robbed that hit in right field a few years ago, and
the walk-off diving catch.
And obviously, we've seen in the postseason. But jumping for joy, throwing the helmet, jumping into the crowd, like just being truly excited. It makes it fun because you get to see, like, childlike emotions from these guys. But then when he kind of talked about it more, you realize, you could chalk it up to him just being sick, but it was a little bit more than that, at least for him.
Yeah, and especially after all the work he put in this offseason, where he didn't really take an offseason. He spent the whole offseason learning how to play shortstop, trying to be the best shortstop he can be. And then, to have it potentially derailed by a weird stomach bug, that had to be the frustrating part, that, like, I'm ready to get out there and prove that I can play a big league shortstop, which, by the way, he has done so far through 5 games. He looks good out there. It hasn't been tested very heavily, but most defenders, if you don't think about them, that means they're doing a good job. And if you do think about them on a great play, then they're doing a great job. But I'll take not thinking about Mookie. If we can not think much about him at shortstop and he's hitting home runs, that's an MVP contender right there. But you have to. I can imagine how frustrating that must have been for him after all the work he put in all offseason, to then have it not be an injury on the field or anything related to baseball, just a dumb stomach bug that totally threatened to derail all that he had worked for.
Yeah. And then, beyond Mookie, just in that, in that game, in that later part of the game, so he hits the homer in the 8th to put the Dodgers ahead. And we'll talk about Tanner Scott a little bit later. He gave up the lead, a wild play at the plate, a play that, based on the angles they showed at Dodger Stadium, I wasn't sure if it was going to be overturned, because you couldn't see him touching the pant leg. You could only really see him touching the leg or foot, and you couldn't tell where the hand was. So I didn't think it was going to overturn. It did. The Dodgers go into extras, and then they end up giving up 2 runs. Conforto goes all out for a play, and it doesn't work out. Then they come back right away. Like, Conforto makes up for it right away, hits a double, gets it going. They get Austin Barnes, who had a big at-bat earlier in the game that didn't come through. They get Will Smith in there. He comes through, ties the game. And then Shohei comes through, and then Mookie comes through. Like, it was I always like those type of rallies and things, instead of just like boom, 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 or I guess 3 homers in a row would have been fun. But like, it's kind of like when you watch sports cliche movies, and it's like, oh, one play and it's a touchdown, or they, hit a home run right off the bat. And it's like, no, I want to build to it and then have that big moment. And that's kind of what this was.
Yeah. As soon as Conforto hit that double, I was pretty confident the Dodgers were going to win, because at that point it's back to a 1-run game. So it's basically as if they had just given up the 1 run, and you're like, okay, well, now we got good part of the lineup coming up, or pretty close to the good part of the lineup, knowing that Smith was going to hit for Barnes. They had shown Barnes in the dugout hadn't even taken off his knee pads, because he knew there was no chance he was getting that at bat. And yeah, I mean, that was a fun game. Walk-offs are always fun. It's kind of funny. Dodgers are 5-0. They haven't totally dominated any of the games. The funny thing is, the closest they've come to dominating was probably Game 5, when their starter only went 1 2/3 innings. Should we call that a segue?
Yeah, that's the way you do it.
The Dodgers starter in Game 5 did only go an inning 2/3. Roki Sasaki. We knew there was going to be a learning curve. We didn't necessarily know it was going to be this steep. We're going to dig into that. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here for one more week, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before, because right now new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. All the teams left in March Madness are really good teams. There's no sure thing there. But you know what? I bet there's some pretty pretty safe bets you could put your $5 on in Major League Baseball lines and get your $200 of bonus bets. Use that on your hunch in March Madness, who you think is going to win it all, whatever you want to do. The FanDuel app is simple to use. When you win, you get paid instantly, no waiting around. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. We are back. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen. Thanks for being an everydayer if you are. Thanks for being here live with us on Sunday night if you are. Thanks for being a Locked On Dodgers insider if you are. If you're not, it's easy to become one. Just go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. Text direct with us, one-on-one conversations, get access to our Discord server, all sorts of fun stuff. So check that out. It's just a few bucks a month with a free 14-day trial. Also, be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles over on YouTube. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by our buddy Paul Francis Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully. And so Roki Sasaki started the game on Saturday for the Dodgers, the series finale against the Tigers. Dodgers won the game 7-3. The offense showed up. We kind of had a feeling the offense would need to do some work in this game because we knew Roki Sasaki was a work in progress. After his struggles in his start in Japan, struggled to throw strikes, struggled with his command. We had hoped that some of that was because of just the adrenaline of starting in Japan. And he definitely looked calmer in this game than he did in his start in Japan. The results weren't better. In fact, they may have been worse. He gave up more runs, didn't last nearly as long, through 61 pitches in an inning and 2/3. Just, we knew after the first inning, there was no way he was getting anything remotely deep in the game. Turns out he didn't even get through the second inning. Allowed just the 2 runs, which, 2 runs in an inning and 2/3. That's not great. But how are you feeling, Vince? Level of concern, 1 to 10, about Roki Sasaki right now?
4. When it comes to it being more control command issues, I'm not as worried. Your mechanics can be out of whack. You could be rushing because you're nervous. There's a lot of different things, and I'm sure that's a lot easier to figure out. This could be because he, has walked a lot of guys and hasn't given too many chances to get hit, but he hasn't really been hit hard. There hasn't been obviously as many balls hit against him as there could be if he wasn't walking a lot of people, but he hasn't been hit hard. The stuff has, when he does happen to throw it in the zone, the stuff has a good, the fastball might be a concern for some people, but it only is a concern if he has command of that, but maybe not his other pitches, and then he has to rely on the fast. Like, there's different concerns there, but based on what we've seen so far, with it being more not putting the ball where he wants to. I mean, this last game was a little bit more concerning in the sense of there was just a lot of non-competitive pitches, but I honestly don't think, like, he's 23 years old. If there was a guy, and there's plenty of guys the Dodgers probably have in the minors that throw hard, have good stuff, and can't find the strike zone. That's kind of where he's at here, but he's in the majors for a different set of circumstances. But yeah, I'm not concerned about it because it's mostly just this. Now, if he figures out to throw strikes, but then he starts getting hit, then maybe the concern rises a little, and then he has to figure out finding the balance between the two.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I saw a lot of talk over the last 24 hours or so of people saying that maybe they should send him to AAA. Maybe when Gonsolin is ready, fill his spot with Gonsolin, let Roki work out some of the kinks in AAA. I'm not opposed to that idea. A lot of it comes down to what the Dodgers think is the issue. Is it adjusting to the different size ball? Because the balls in the U.S. are a little bit bigger than the ones in Japan. They are less tacky. Both of those things seem like little things until you're trying to pitch to big league hitters, and suddenly every little thing feels like a big thing. And so if it has to do with the different ball, yeah, send him to AAA. They use the same balls they do in the big leagues. Let him get used to that, in AAA, if they think that's going to help. It's one of those things where you and I sitting here in our recording studios don't quite have access to the information the Dodgers do as far as what they think is causing this. I mean, he was missing his spots by multiple feet the other day. Is that the size of the ball? I don't know. It could, if it's mechanical, maybe it's keep working on the bullpens, but keep figuring it out at the big league level. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, on that point, it's mostly, they're going to give him at least a couple more starts, I would imagine, before anything even gets to a point of going to the minors to figure it out. And I think honestly, the main reason that you would send him down if he does continue to struggle is just because you can't have your bullpen throwing 7+ innings, 6+ innings every time he's out. It's more about that than anything else. The Dodgers don't have a true long man in the pen, really. Like Kasperius can be that if they really needed him to, but he's kind of become more of a 1 to 2 inning guy bullpen wise. He hasn't worked much beyond that. So without a true long man, I think that's the only reason the Dodgers would even consider sending him down, is just because, we can't tax our pen, 6 innings every time out.
And they didn't even bring Kasperius out for a second inning when he only threw 10 pitches in his 1 inning of work in that game when their starter only went an inning and 2/3. If ever there was a time to stretch out Kasperius, that kind of told us a lot about what their thinking is about Kasperius right now, which I'm totally in favor of. I think Ben Kasperius is probably at his best right now as a 1 inning reliever and just, pumping gas in there. NS in the chat says, Roki has giant hands. I doubt the ball size matters. I think that's probably a false dichotomy, because we're not saying Roki's hands are too small to deal with the big league ball. It's just, no matter how big your hands are, throwing something a different size than what you're used to is a different experience. And so, in a way, I kind of hope it does have to do with the ball size, because that really is more of a mechanical thing. Because like NS says, it's not like his hands aren't big enough. And so it's just getting used to it. And maybe they can do that in the bullpen sessions. But yeah, like you said, they can't afford to have clunkers like this very often. It's what eventually cost James Paxton his job last year. The Dodgers allowed James Paxton to be bad for a long time last year. It wasn't until he was bad and not pitching deep into games that he lost his spot on the team. And so, they can deal with one. The offense, we saw it. A starter can have a clunker, and the Dodgers can still win the game 7-3. It's, if you can't get deep in the game, it's going to tax the bullpen, and so that might end up being the determining factor on where he makes his adjustments. Is can the big league roster afford to have him starting every 5th game?
Yeah, and going beyond that, I know that video was circulating of the close-up of him in the dugout, and maybe some tears, at least definitely some emotions, definitely not looking happy, which makes sense. And I'm all for players showing emotions, whether it's positively or negatively. I don't necessarily back in the day I probably would be like, don't show it now, or even coaching little league, more so just like to kind of cheer the kid up, not necessarily tax him. But for Roki, like, even if he was, I'm fine with it. And it's mostly because, he's young, and we know what his backstory of what happened in Japan with, his family. And I honestly don't take it as, oh, he's, whatever it is because he can't handle it or anything else like that. He's probably so concerned that he's let down his family name, Japan, like all this other stuff, the way he pitched that game, more so that than anything else. He probably carries all that pressure, puts it on himself. And, maybe that's something the Dodgers are also talking to him about, of just like the mental side of things. Like, look, like, you're in the big leagues, you're already here, blah, 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 blah. Anything else you need to tell him, you don't need to carry all this weight and all that. Because we know how prideful and the Japanese players are. Not prideful in a bad way, prideful in like
proud.
Sense. Yeah, exactly. Like they're here representing their country, not just themselves personally. So I don't have an issue with it.
Yeah, I'm 24 and a half years older than Roki Sasaki. I'm old enough to be his dad, and they're most players these days. I'm old enough to be their dad, and I've reached that stage in my life where I think of it from that standpoint. I've got kids. My daughter is exactly 3 years younger than Roki. Very close in age. I've got an adult son who is a pitcher. And it's like that's kind of my mindset when I think about these. Like, yeah, anybody giving him crap for showing emotion, good. I want him to care. And I want him to have that support. And I'm glad that he is on a team with a couple people who do share a similar, culture and background and language, so that he's not totally alone. I'm glad that he has a support system. It's got to be hard to be in a new country and then the one thing that you've always been great at, oh crap, I'm not good at that right now. It's got to be hard. And you know what, it's one of those things where eventually he'll look back and, and remember how awful that felt, but it'll be from a standpoint of, and now I've figured it out. And now I'm a dominant big league starter. It's just a question of when that'll be. So I'm interested to see, because like you said, there's no reason. The Dodgers knew that Roki Sasaki was going to be a work in progress, that there was going to be speed bumps. I would be very surprised if they do anything immediately as far as sending him to the minors or anything, because really this is one bad start in Japan that is totally understandable. And then this one that, who knows what the next one will be like. If the next one is very much like this one, then it probably becomes a serious consideration of, just for the sake of the pitching staff, we may need him to figure this out in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
Couple other pitchers that the Dodgers signed this offseason, two former closers, Kirby Yates and Tanner Scott. The Dodgers signed them both to be elite relievers. One of them has been. The one whose name rhymes with great has been great. The one whose name rhymes with not has not. We're going to dig into that. So thank you for making us your first listen, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. We are back. Thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen. Thanks for being an everydayer. If you're not an everydayer, just watch or listen every weekday morning, and then you are an everydayer. It's that easy. Become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. Be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles over on YouTube. And I took a little poetic license. Yates doesn't quite rhyme with great, but it's close enough, and
if you're a rapper, you would slide.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard some people rhyme some pretty interesting things in Hamilton. Like, you wouldn't even think twice about that. Like, I don't think Lin-Manuel Miranda would even try to rhyme one syllable words anyway. It's like, I'm going to rhyme this 8-syllable word with this entire sentence and it's all going to flow. So, I did my best, but I do still want to know if Kirby Yates wears number 38, because 38 rhymes with Kirby Yates. I haven't found that out for sure, but I'd be shocked if that's not why. But Dodgers signed Kirby Yates.
I'll work on that for you.
All right. Yeah, you have access. I forgot I have an insider. Yes, next time you're there, ask him, okay? But the Dodgers signed Kirby Yates and Tanner Scott both to be elite relievers. Yates has looked awesome. He's faced 10 batters. He struck out 7 of them. Just looks filthy, which is kind of funny because he was the one that some people had concerns about during spring training. Tanner Scott has struggled in the 2 games he's pitched. He's been hit hard. He's given up runs and just not looking dominant. So I guess let's start with Kirby Yates. Are you buying into, is he going to strike out 70% of the batters he faces this year?
I can't imagine he'll keep that number up, but I also can't imagine that he'll be very good this year and continue to throw what he does. And, it's one of those things. You've talked about it before when he was on other teams and facing the Dodgers, and when the Dodgers have had success against them. And, it's basically it's kind of like a Sergio Romo with the slider. Like, if you lay off of it, you'll probably have more success because you have to make him bring it in the zone or at least throw some more strikes. And if you don't lay off of his off-speed pitches, then he can find other ways to beat you, and he can beat you that way. So, it obviously won't be as good as this, but I expect him to be pretty good. He was very good last year, and I don't see a reason for that to change, especially now being with the Dodgers.
Yeah, I've been pleasantly surprised, because, what you just said was the Dodgers' secret back when Kirby Yates was the best reliever in baseball for the Padres. The Dodgers were the only team that could ever have success against him because they were the team that figured out how to lay off the splitter and make him throw something in the zone. One thing I've been pleasantly surprised about the last few days is seeing that Yates is landing that splitter at the bottom of the zone sometimes too. And so it can't be an auto take pitch. They can't just pick it up and say, like they say with the knuckleball, if it's low, let it go. If it's high, let it fly, because everything's going to drop some. Same thing with the splitter. If you can tell that it's a splitter and it's low, usually you just, okay, I'm just not going to swing that. But if he can start landing that at the bottom of the zone, that's a huge deal. We saw this. It's the same concept that we saw with Blake Trinan against Manny Machado last year. I think it was Machado, one of those hitters he made look ridiculous in the postseason. Actually, no, it was that last series against the Padres of the regular season when he made Manny look ridiculous. because he threw him two different sliders. He threw him one that didn't break as much and landed on the outside corner, which got Manny thinking, crap, I have to swing at this slider. And then he threw the big sweeper that ended up a foot outside, and Manny looked ridiculous for strike three. It's that same concept. As if you can land it for a strike, sometimes it totally changes the game. The hitters have to respect it. I think that's been a huge key for Kirby Yates so far, is landing that splitter for a strike just often enough that hitters can't just disregard it.
Yeah, well, that's how his stuff works, and that's how good pitchers work.
Yeah. As for Tanner Scott, Dave Roberts said that he's not concerned about Scott. He thinks it's just, figuring things out, just easing his way into the season, whatever it is. I forget the wording that Dave Roberts used, but it was basically, he said he's a good pitcher. He's going to figure it out and it'll be fine. Do you have any level of concern on him?
Before I get into level of concern, I haven't seen it as much, but if there are people out there that believe Tanner Scott's struggles are related to the fact that he's not the closer, and he's been up in a couple different spots now, and one was closing situation, one wasn't, and whatever. That doesn't concern Tanner Scott. He wasn't always a closer in his career. He wasn't even a closer for the Padres last year. For the Padres, he was a closer for the Marlins for as many games as he could have tried to close out over there. But with the Padres, he pitched in 28 games, only finished 6 of them, and only had 4 saves. It's not a matter of that. It's just a matter of, whatever it is for him, figuring it out, whether, I don't know. I don't know him enough to kind of really see anything. I don't see anything concerning. The velocity may be down a slight tick, but I don't feel that's the reasoning. I just feel like, and he has thrown 3 of the 5 games. Obviously, there was a week in between, but the first back-to-back, he didn't look as good the second night in a row, and maybe that could be as simple as that.
Yeah. So I think I'm with Dave Roberts that I'm not concerned at all yet. And the Dodgers do have plenty of other options, and they can put Tanner Scott in whatever roles they need to. If he does need to figure it out in, more pressure or less pressure or whatever, they'll have those opportunities. But there's nothing glaring. Like you said, the velocity, it's within the margin of error. This early in the season, I don't have that granular data of how hard does he usually throw on March 28th, so I don't know if it's down for this time of year or not. I think he's going to be fine. And this is, though, why you build a super bullpen, so that when one guy struggles, you do have 4 other guys who are going to pitch well. And hard to complain too much when they're 5-0.
Yeah, it's one of those where, like you said, they haven't looked necessarily great in any one game, but that's also a very high standard. Like even on, Saturday, you talked about Sasaki coming out and everything else, and they allowed 3 runs. And they haven't allowed a lot of runs, even though we've talked about different guys having not the greatest outings that they could have or struggling just a bit.
Yeah, the bullpen only allowed the 1 run on Saturday, and that was Luis Garcia, one of the guys who we're not really counting on for too much.
Or counting down Evan Phillips, and Phillips is due back before Kopech. So
yeah, one of those guys. So all right, last thing we want to talk about really quickly: the Yankees unleashed a new weapon, the Torpedo bats. Their first game with the Torpedo bats, they hit 9 home runs, including the first 3 pitches of the game against their old friend Nestor Cortez. Poor Nestor.
I wanted to say he just wanted to prove that the Yankees were the better team, but 2 of the 3 guys that hit the homers weren't on the Yankees last year. So
yeah. Old friends Cody Bellinger and Paul Goldschmidt were 2 of them. Aaron Judge, the other one. You have any thoughts on these Torpedo bats, Vince?
No, initially I was there was a lot of outcry, and I was like, well, I don't think the Yankees would cheat on in that sense. When other teams cheat, they're trying to hide it. There's no way to hide this if they were trying to cheat. It's very funny how it kind of takes off. Even the reliever from the Brewers, well, it's the Yankees, so they'll look the other way or something like that. And it's it's within the rules. Other people already have the bats, so clearly that's the other part too. We saw some guys from other teams have the bats on Sunday already. They weren't made that day. That guy on the Twins, I'm sure he had one ordered. Yeah, he had one ordered already. Unless he knows somebody at the bat company, or they had him ready to go and they just overnighted it when Mitch Garver saw like, oh, Yankees hit all these home runs with this bat. I want it right now. Like clearly something was in the running already. Yankees, whoever they hired. It is interesting though that this is the first time that this has been done or that we've seen it. I'm sure, honestly, it might have even happened before, but maybe it didn't take off.
Maybe. I saw somebody on Twitter saying everybody's complaining that the Yankees are cheating, but if it was the Dodgers were doing it, nobody would have a peep. I'm like, yeah, because the one thing we've learned about social media is nobody accuses the Dodgers of cheating ever. It's my only thought on it, it's very clearly legal right now because the only restrictions are how big around the barrel can be at its maximum width. Doesn't say where on the bat the maximum width has to be. And that's all they did here is they moved the maximum width down farther to the areas where the bat hits the ball most often. Pretty smart, I do wonder, though, if Major League Baseball might eventually feel a need to step in. It's way too soon to know. We don't know how many home runs the Yankees would have hit on Saturday.
And Judge has 4 home runs without that bat.
Yeah. So we don't know how many they would have hit with regular bats. How much of it was Nestor Cortez? How much of it was, just life in general? So it's way too soon to definitively say these are going to lead to a ton of homers. But if we do get to that point where there are a lot more homers hit with this, Major League Baseball might need to step in just because that will then incentivize pitchers to focus more on missing bats, which then goes back to max effort, shorter stints for pitchers, everything, all the stuff that they're trying to get rid of, trying to reduce the strikeout rate. I think this will just increase the strikeout rate because every pitcher will be going, I'm afraid of contact, so I need to go for the strikeout, which is going to lead to more injuries and lead to all longer games, all that stuff that they don't want. So I'm interested to see, I doubt they do anything midseason anyway, although they did with the sticky stuff a few years ago. So maybe they would if it was a big enough problem. But I'm sure that Major League Baseball has their eye on it just for that reason, because if this leads to a lot more strikeouts, that could be damaging to the game.
Yeah, and the other part of it is Yankees, unless they didn't get the shipment until Friday morning, they did play on Thursday. They scored 4 runs. I don't know how many of those runs were homer. I know Wells hit a homer. But so there was a game where they weren't completely, scoring 20 runs and hitting all these homers. So
yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. Interesting to see if any Dodgers start using it, who knows? I could see there's a few Dodgers I can think of who might benefit from it if it really is beneficial. So
give it to Barnes just to see what happens.
Yeah, well, stop swinging 3 fastballs down the middle, So
yeah, I was 2-0. 2-0, you think you should have had take to 2 strike sign?
With Ohtani on deck in that situation, yeah, I think also I get what he's trying to do, thinking, well, they're not going to want to walk me. They're going to throw me a strike, so I'm going to be aggressive, but you're still Austin Barnes. You're still, it's showing, make him throw you 3 strikes before he throws you 2 more balls. Once he's gone 2-0, the command isn't great necessarily. Make him throw you 3 strikes. I would have had, a couple take signs on for sure. So
same.
All right. Well, I think you got anything else for today, Vince?
Got nothing else.
Hey, we had a rare Sunday off day, but luckily we had 2 games to talk about that we hadn't talked about yet. So tomorrow the Dodgers start the series with the Braves on Monday evening. Should be a fun
swept
series.
In San Diego.
Braves got swept by the Padres. Braves are going to come in hungry for a win. Dodgers are going to have to be on their toes to take care of business there and hopefully start the Braves off 0-7. I guess that couldn't happen to a nicer team. I still, remnants of the early 90s, I still don't like the Braves. But that'll do it for us for today. Thank you all for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen. Thanks for being here with us live on Sunday evening. Good crowd here, good chat. Appreciate all of you. Remember to check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, the 2 24/7 streaming channels on YouTube from the Locked On Podcast Network. You can also go beyond the podcast, become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Dodgers. For your second listen, you can check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball with host Dominic Martino and Matthew Ane. MLB Fantasy Draft season is here. Be the most informed fan and set yourself up for a league win. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at VinceSense91. I'm on Twitter at Snydog, and both of our DMs are open over there. You You can also email us at lockedondodgers@gmail.com or send us a voicemail or a text message to 323-863-LOCK-5625. We are here every weekday morning. We hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Have a good one.